Chapter 461, Two Birds with One Stone. After receiving the information, Gouffet was no more than a meter away from Giordano. He was now well within the range to pull out his sword and plunge it into the NPC. Gouffet would surely have done this if he could confirm that he was able to insta-kill it. However, it was apparent to him that he was unable to do so. As the captain that was always surrounded by its subordinates, Gouffet believed that Giordano would possess a transcendental strength. If Gouffet already had difficulty taking down the average lone guard, insta-killing this captain would simply be an unrealistic fantasy. That was why Gouffet decided against attacking it. He took the stack of papers as he watched Giordano and his cadre of guards leave, chatting in jubilation. He casually stared at the information he was given. Damn, how coincidental. Gouffet croaked. The information directed Gouffet to his target, which was incidentally the park maniac in Ziota City whom Slyras had just mentioned, Cool Apple. Gouffet flipped through the 17 pages he was given, which detailed Cool Apple's level, job class, and committed crimes, a record of his park history. It seemed that this daily bounty mission was actually a tally of a player's accumulated park value, and the park maniac Cool Apple was second to none in this. So getting targeted for the daily bounty mission was the natural order of things. They couldn't possibly even sentence the time of imprisonment accordingly, right? Wouldn't this kid end up with life imprisonment at this rate? Gouffet sighed. For a park record that was 17 pages long, it would not really be too much for this person to be given such a sentencing, considering the amount of blood on his hands in terms of the player levels he removed. At the same time, Gouffet wondered if he would often be chosen as the daily bounty mission target himself. However, after glancing upon Cool Apple's total tally, he realized that he was nothing compared to the man. While he might have those occasional moments when he became the champion of the total amount of park value held at any one time, there was just no way he could catch up to Cool Apple. With a total tally of 1,642 park points, it only meant that Cool Apple had dropped the levels of 1,642 players. If he started from the beta until now, that would mean that this man had killed about 10 men on average each day. Gouffet was embarrassed. This was what it meant to be a true park maniac. Those from Young Masters Elite were being far too unworldly if they had actually considered Gouffet as one. With that in mind, Gouffet was rather interested in meeting this person. Opening up his quest log, he could already see the Ziota City Daily Bounty mission right there, but it was just the title, since the content was already physically in Gouffet's hands. Gouffet was taken aback by this. Normally, bounty mission would have a set of coordinates and the serial number of the target shown on the quest log, yet this daily bounty mission actually had no hints at all. Did that mean he would have to search for Cool Apple himself? Searching for somebody yet again. Gouffet had just played this game with Southern Lone Blade. Why must he always be bogged down by such problems? It was at this moment when Gouffet received another message asking for updates on his end from the three he had left on the wall's walkway. I didn't kill the NPC, but it gave me a quest, Gouffet replied, uncertain if he should laugh or cry. What quest? It's a daily bounty mission. We'll meet up and talk about this once I'm out, Gouffet replied. With a longing glance at Giordano, Gouffet figured that since he had easy access to the government city hall, there should be no problem coming back to take another go at this when he was free. Leaving the Vigilante Corps chamber and exiting the building via the back door, he climbed up the wall using the rope Yenziazu had placed there earlier. Take a look yourselves. Gouffet passed the information he had in his hands over to the three. Cool Apple. Slyras repeated. 1,642. Sword Demon was astonished. After all, it was not too difficult to occasionally do something. It was the persistence to repeat something day after day that was demanding. There was no doubt that this man was a true park maniac to be able to park 1,642 times. What do you know about this guy? Gouffet asked Slyras. I exchanged blows with this guy once when he was at level 30, Slyras replied. What happened? Gouffet asked. I died. Slyras was very remorseful about this but still told the truth. He's really very skilled. I am no match for him. If we have a rematch now, the outcome will still be the same. Did he not look for you again? Sword Demon asked. He felt that this sort of park maniac would surely enjoy finding a high-level player like Slyras as his target. I don't know, but I've never bumped into him after, Slyrus answered. Considering how huge Parallel World was, it was not that easy to bump into each other serendipitously, or it would not have been such a chore to locate anyone. There will always be players on the receiving end of his attack every day. Of course, he may not always succeed, or his park record won't just be this, Slyrus said. But this man has never been slain before at the very least, right? Sword Demon probed. Yeah, he is always successful at getting away when he realizes that things aren't going his way, Slyrus affirmed. That's pretty interesting. Gufei clenched his fists. So are you gonna go search for Cool Apple, or are you gonna continue on your quest to assassinate Giordano? Sword Demon asked. I'll do them both. Since this man possesses a bounty license just like me, I'm afraid he is aware of the daily bounty mission, so there's a very good chance he'll do it every day. I'll stay here by Giordano and monitor the situation first. At the same time, I'll wait for that guy to come and pick up his daily bounty mission and complete this quest. It's two birds with one stone. Gufei had already thought this through and specifically took the time to come out and tell the three of them the situation as it stood. This was to convince them of leaving, as there was nothing they could do for what came after. Sure enough, once the three figured out that they had no way of entering the government building and were naturally unable to do what Gufei was doing, they could only regretfully take their leave. Do you want me to leave this rope here for you? Yenziazu asked. No need, I've got plenty on me. Gufei chuckled. Sword Demon audibly sighed. He had originally thought he found something meaningful to do, but there was nothing he could do after climbing up this wall in the end. Gufei recognized that sigh, so he could only help distract him. It's about time Eternal Dominion gets online. I'll let him know when he's on and help you set up a meeting. Oh, yeah. Sword Demon was rather happy when he read this message, but the moment he thought about the debt he was shouldering, he could not help but feel a little melancholic. This mingling of sadness amid happiness, fortune and misfortune often existed together. Gufei got back to the ground and entered the government city hall again. This time, he knew his way around and headed toward the Vigilante Core chamber. The scene within was just the same as before he had left. Giordano! Gufei shouted loudly, to see if he could draw him over. Giordano blinked. Is the mission completed? Nope, Gufei replied. Giordano immediately turned his head away and no longer bothered to look at him. Gufei had no choice but to sit down on the couch and waited. The sky outside the window got darker and darker, as the game officially entered nighttime. Gufei wondered what these NPCs would do when it became night, and he soon got his answer. Several guards stepped toward Gufei and stood before him, indicating for him to leave. The NPCs had treated his presence like air all this while, but he felt a little uncomfortable now that the NPCs were suddenly taking the initiative to make demands. Can I not leave? When Gufei discovered that some of these guards and NPCs like Giordano were looking to leave, he felt that was an opportune development. Perhaps, he might have a chance to be alone with Giordano. No. The guard coldly rejected Gufei's request. Is there any way I can? Gufei was nationally aware there was no way he could appeal to the NPCs through emotions, so he was trying to understand what sort of restrictions they were working under at the moment. You do not have enough clearance, the guard answered. What sort of clearance is needed? Gufei asked. The guard did not answer. Instead, the system sent him a message. Night has descended. Players are requested to vacate the government city hall at once or will be seen as invaders and be dealt with accordingly. The guards were already glaring at Gufei intensely. He finally did not dare to tarry and hurriedly made his way down the stairs. He originally wanted to leave via the same route he had used to get in, but he soon discovered that the back door had been locked for the night. Giving the door a shake or two and seeing that it would not budge, the system prompt rang once more as all the guards along the corridor began to place their hands on the hilt of their weapons while looking at Gufei. No longer caring for possible consequences, he hurriedly sped toward the front entrance. Bang! The sound of the heavy doors slamming shut sounded from behind him. He dashed out from the front entrance. The doors to the government city hall locking behind him a second after he dashed out the front door, making Gufei feel as if he had just escaped from the site of a disaster. Finding himself in the huge courtyard in this moment, Gufei looked around and saw that the position of the guards around it at night was different from what he had observed in the day. Those powerful stationary guards that were no more than ceremonial guards had all disappeared, while the number of guards patrolling the premises had also significantly diminished. Is there perhaps another chance to enter the building? Gufei took a few steps back and lifted his head to gaze up the government city hall in its entirety, looking to see if there were any alternative ways to get in. This was when he heard the hurried steps coming from behind him. Turning around, he saw players from every direction rushing toward him. It was even more apparent that there was already a thief in stealth mode skulking somewhere near him. These were players from Flower Gazing in the Fog. The guild had arranged for their members to patrol this courtyard every day. They were doing this partly to be the foremost helpers of the NPCs if anything cropped up, increasing their completion rate as a result of their timely assistance. Still, they were mainly doing this to prevent other players from coming and sabotaging their quest. Such people were not in the minority, since most of the guilds inside the city would be loath to see Flower Gazing in the Fog become stronger without attempting any sort of interference. And because plenty of guilds out there had completed the quests rewarded by the system for placing first in the previous PvP tournament, everybody was already aware that the reward for a guild quest completion would directly level a guild one's. This meant that guilds like Flower Gazing in the Fog, which had yet to accomplish their guild quest, would have the chance to accomplish something Oathless Sword had once dreamed of doing, getting their guild to level 6 by their own efforts before receiving the guild quest reward that would send them straight to level 7. Flower Gazing in the Fog had actively pushed all their members to contribute and reach level 6 precisely because they had found out about the prize for the guild quest completion. As such, if Flower Gazing in the Fog was able to get to level 7 instantly through the reward while the rest of the guilds inside the city were still at level 5, these guilds would truly have no way of going against them, which was why they were so worried of such an eventuality. Were it not for the fact that the entire courtyard was filled with guards, these guilds would really love to gather their troops and thrash the place proper, dropping Flower Gazing the Fog's completion progress well into the negatives. Unfortunately, the presence of the guards prevented them from going all out with their harassment and could only settle for a few minor methods of aggravation daily. The members from Flower Gazing in the Fog were all pissed, but what else could they do aside from being more cautious in their preventive measures? As everybody became more and more adept at working security, it had been quite some time since these troublemakers successfully made any headway in their attempts. However, just then, as the game transitioned into nighttime, someone actually discovered an unknown player appearing before the government city hall entrance. Nobody had any knowledge of this player entering the premise, and the defense over at the entrance was considered to be the strictest. The state of alarm that ensued caused all the members of Flower Gazing in the Fog to descend upon Gufei and have him surrounded. Chapter 462. Another opportunity to exchange blows. A confusing din of voices was heard from the crowd as emotions ran high. The sudden appearance of this player had left the members from Flower Gazing in the Fog frightened, for it was far too bizarre and inconceivable. It was probably some sort of intricately laid out scheme, which was meant to take them by surprise. What did this man plan to do? Seeing that he was examining the government city hall so closely, could he be thinking of detonating the entire building? Forget about blowing up this building. Even if Gufei went forth and just knocked on the doors, they were still worried that the NPCs would run out claiming he was disturbing their beauty sleep and deduct their progress. Thus, in the blink of an eye, they all had this interloper surrounded, awaiting direct orders from their guild leader, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple, for the resolution of this matter. Players from the various job classes all dashed forth to gather here, and because 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple was a warrior, there was no way he would be able to take the lead and be the first to arrive, so all he could do was shout, "Quick! Protect the entrance!" Roger that. Several thieves heeded this order. They were usually stealthed somewhere near the entrance. They deactivated their stealth regardless what was happening and formed a line to block the entrance with their bodies instead of rushing toward Gufei. The other players continued to dash onward as they shouted, with many wielding very eye-catching objects in their hands. Upon closer look, Gufei realized that they were torches. A good number of players were presently holding lit torches, shining as bright as day against the murky darkness that was the night in-game. A torch was a common item to the players inside the city given the limited vision they would have due to the fog. When they were unable to locate their comrades, players would often light their torches and use them as beacons to let the others know their current location. However, to an outsider like Gufei, this was a sight that he had never had the chance to experience. All he saw was several players closing in on him while roaring, and before he knew it, they had thrown their torches at him, as if they were grenades. Countless flames sailed through the night sky in an arc and landed at where Gufei was standing. With the light from these flames, Gufei looked to have been illuminated by a powerful spotlight and became the center of attention. Gufei remained calm despite the fact that he was about to be buried under a bonfire's worth of torches. This assault of thrown torches was quite a scary sight to behold. Yet it was nothing compared to traversing 4C's archer formation in terms of speed, accuracy, and coordination. He drew out his sword from his dimensional pocket and took a deep breath before proceeding to make his move. Piercing, stabbing, slashing, and cutting in every direction, the light from the torches seemed to act as a stage light that shone upon his performance. Gufei danced like a hurricane of swords, altering the trajectory of the torches whenever his sword tip made contact. The torches all ended up knocking into one another as they spun, making it look as if all the torches had collided right into a wall as they suddenly began to rain down to the ground, forming a circle of fire around Gufei. The players were all flabbergasted. It was not unexpected for their torches to miss the target, and plenty of other players had shown various methods of dealing with their concerted flaming torches, yet none had dealt it like this. To their knowledge, this sort of attack could only be dodged and not blocked, yet that was precisely what this man before them had achieved. Gufei stood within that circle of fire, but because the glare from the flames were too concentrated and too bright to bear, everyone could barely make out how the interloper looked. Meanwhile, Gufei had rolled up his sleeves and was busy fanning himself with his hand, awkwardly muttering to himself, "I screwed up big time this time. It's really hot in here." Inside that circle of fire, Gufei felt as if his hair and eyebrows were about to catch on fire from the intense heat. "I can't go on like this." Gufei reached his hand out and blinked right out of the circle, instantly feeling a pleasant gust of cool air wash over him. "Ah!" screamed the people around him. The blurry figure that was illuminated within the circle had suddenly disappeared and materialized closer to them, causing plenty of the players in the crowd to believe that something paranormal had just occurred. "A ghost!" someone cried out in fright. "Fuck, what's so scary about ghosts? We've even killed zombies before," barked the self-proclaimed bravest player within flower gazing in the fog. This person usually enjoyed grinding his levels in the cemetery grinding map, which most players often found to be dreary and scary, and would often take on such non-human and truly gruesome creatures. Seeing how some of his fellow guildmates were panicking over this, he showed his disdain to the lot as he stepped forward fearlessly while the others had every intention to retreat. The man carefully looked Gufei over and burst into laughter. "He's clearly just a mage." "Mage?" Everybody was stunned even as they saw Gufei tidy his sleeves as he walked toward the crowd. Some of them began to quietly raise their weapon and were prepared to strike when someone suddenly yelled, "Wait a minute! Don't move!" This yell came from somewhere behind this bulk of crowd. A path cracked through the mob, and everybody saw their guild leader step through with the newest guild member in tow. The person was one of the 5 unyielding experts and the #1 mage in Parallel World, Drifting. Gufei waved to greet Drifting when he saw him approach. "It's you all right. And I was just wondering who else could have such ridiculous skill, but lo and behold." Drifting sighed. "Haha, yup, it's me." Guild leader Flowing Maple, "How do you do?" "To think we'd meet each other again this soon." Gufei and 3 Sides of Flowing Maple greeted each other. However, the expression on 3 Sides of Flowing Maple's face was grim at the moment, and he no longer had his earlier warmth and courteousness. That was entirely because he needed to find out the following: "What are you doing here?" "Nothing much. I'm just strolling about," Gufei said. 3 Sides of Flowing Maple furrowed his brows, as they had no way of checking the completion progress of their guild quest at present. They could only find out information about this through the NPC Giordano. Therefore, There was no way of telling if Gufei had done something to compromise their guild quest. That was precisely why he had ordered some of his men to look around the courtyard for anything out of place. At the moment, the report from all these players were one and the same: they found none out of the ordinary. Miles, just directly come clean if you have something to confess. There's no point in being all sneaky about things. Drifting spoke. He refused to believe that Gufei was here to have us troll. Had this been the case, he would have already done so with Yanziazu from before. This was highly suspicious, given the fact that it had not been too long since his last visit, and with how the man was able to suddenly appear right by the entrance of the government city hall without alerting anyone else of his presence. Drifting might not have any idea what method Gufei had used to do this, but he was certain that the man would not have done something as casual as taking a simple stroll as he had claimed. Gufei shrugged. Fine. Actually, I do have a quest here. I wonder if guild leader Flowing Maple will do me a favor on this? So that's how it is. 3 sighs of Flowing Maple laughed before answering. For Brother Miles to have done all this for your quest, it appears you are aware of the importance of our quest here, and that we won't let strangers get anywhere near here. So, I think it's best for Brother Miles to abandon his quest temporarily as a favor to us. Wait till we are done with our guild quest, and we will naturally allow anyone to come and go as they please here. Gufei was rather surprised, for he had never thought that 3 sighs of Flowing Maple would give him such an answer. It was a polite but firm refusal, which had easily placed the guild leader on the side of logic. If Gufei were to insist, he would instead be seen as the one being unreasonable. After all, there would usually not be any issues abandoning a quest, unless he were to say that his quest had a time limit attached to it. Gufei did not wish to lie over this, so he simply laughed it off. In that case, I'll just have to think of a solution again. Thank you, Brother Miles, 3 sighs of Flowing Maple said with a stiff upper lip. At the same time, he waved his hand to his men. Everyone, please make way. Everybody shuffled to reveal a path, as Gufei waved toward the crowd. Sorry for the intrusion, everyone. With that, he strode off. Let me send you off. Drifting stepped forward and placed his hand on Gufei's shoulder, walking him out in a very conversational manner. Hey, what are you up to? Drifting asked in a whisper. Quest. Gufei answered. You really have a quest? Is it related to them? Drifting asked. Them? Aren't you one of them? Gufei asked back. I've only recently joined. It'll take a while to get used to it, Drifting corrected. Gufei laughed. You're always flitting about and joining different guilds. Do you have any specific goal in mind? My IGN is Drifting, he said. My goal is obviously to leave my footsteps all over the world. Oh, so that's how it is. That's truly terrific. Don't change the subject. What quest are you doing? Drifting asked. Well, it may not be convenient to tell you, Gufei replied. So that means that it's indeed related to the quest Flower Gazing in the Fog is doing? Perhaps. I'm not too sure myself. Actually, I'm not even sure if this is really a quest. Gufei laughed bitterly. What are you talking about? I don't get it, Drifting said. That just means that you haven't drifted to enough places yet. Continue with it. It's important to increase your experience. Gufei patted him encouragingly. That's not the point, Drifting said. If you are indeed here to cause trouble for the guild quest, that means we will have another opportunity to exchange blows. That's why if I were you, I wouldn't be coming online over the next few days, Gufei said. Drifting stared at Gufei wordlessly. Gufei started back at him, melancholia lingering in his eyes. I've already slain 2 out of the original 5 unyielding experts. Do you wish to be the third? Drifting was quiet. Actually, you should be considered to be the first, except you got lucky as death during the PvP tournament would not result in losing a level, Gufei continued. Drifting was still reticent. That's why it's best if you stay offline in the following days. It's for your good. Gufei patted his shoulder yet again. Silence. I'm leaving. Gufei waved as he departed. Fuck. It was not until Gufei had disappeared into the mist that Drifting finally swore. Returning to the government city hall, Drifting saw that 3 sighs of Flowing Maple had already convened several core members of the guild and was discussing tactics with them. They immediately fell silent when they saw Drifting walk over. Drifting was already used to such a scene. He had just joined the guild today, so how would he be able to secure the trust of everyone? It was impossible despite him being one of the 5 unyielding experts. This was especially the case since he was friends with a suspicious individual. Drifting had a feeling that 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple might not want him participating this incident this time. Who would have thought that, the moment he got near, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple would take the initiative to ask, Drifting, that friend of yours, do you think he'll affect our guild quest? Definitely. Drifting nodded. I've already participated in this sort of guild quest reward once, and there are portions before when we got entangled with competitive quests. I believe that, while the content of this guild quest reward differs from that one, the difficulty is still the same. Competitive quests will surely be a part of your guild mission, and it may have only just begun. Chapter 463, Number 9. 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple valued Drifting's input, so he immediately followed up with a question, is Brother Drifting able to perhaps give us further details regarding what we could specifically expect? It would be similar to what we face from the usual competitive quests. At the same time that your guild is tasked with defending the government city hall, the system would perhaps detail out competitive quests at the Hall of Guild Creation, Hall of Mercenaries, or other locations to sick players onto you guys, making things difficult for all the parties involved. Drifting explained. Damn. This again. One of the core members cursed. It was likely that this man had experienced competitive quests himself and suffered his fair share. Guild quest. Or mercenary mission. 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple repeated once before immediately saying, quick, send men over to the Hall of Mercenaries and Hall of Guild Creation to take a look. Check to see what sort of mission is available. Members from Flower Gazing in the Fog were recently focusing on how they could make progress to finish up their guild quest, so it had been quite some time since any of them picked up any new missions or quests from either hall. Hearing what Drifting had just said, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple instantly realized their mistake and could only hope that it was not too late to salvage the situation. Meanwhile, Gufei, who had departed from the courtyard, took no more than a few steps away from the gates when he heard someone call out from behind him, Bro. Darkness was all around him, and this voice was soft yet clear. Even though it was abrupt, Gufei was able to determine where the voice had sounded from. He turned his head to the left. If he was not mistaken, that voice came from somewhere near the base of the wall on his left. There was no one there when he looked, however, and all he saw was fog. This was the magic that the government city hall's courtyard contained. 2 different worlds existed within and beyond the wall without a break between the two. Players would suddenly step into a world of fog after the clarity they experienced within the compound. Who's there? He casually asked, unsure if the other party was addressing him. Do you mind if we speak? The voice sounded once more. Gufei could already clearly determine the direction it had come from this time, but he was still unable to see anyone. The person seemed to be purposefully hiding within the fog, not wishing to reveal himself or herself. Who are you? What's this about? He asked. Why don't you follow me first? This person suggested. Gufei laughed bitterly. If I can't see you, how am I gonna follow you? Fire immediately ignited and floated before him. Follow the flame from the torch. The person said. This was the correct usage of the torch in Xiao City. He had no idea what this person was intending, but as the saying went, a person's skill matches his bravery. He had no qualms about following the glow in the distance. He even tried to quicken his pace in an effort to catch up and take a look at just who the person was, but the moment he could make out the faintest outline of a human figure, this person would immediately quicken his pace as well, maintaining the distance with him from start to finish. Even though Gufei did not succeed in catching a glimpse of this person's looks, he at least had an idea as to what his or her job class was. It could either be an archer or a thief. Let's see just what in the world this person is trying to do, Gufei thought to himself as his left hand dove into his dimensional pocket and gripped the handle of his moonlit knife walls. Perhaps, this was how people in this city robbed others. Gufei could not help but feel a little excited when he thought of this possibility. The person was leading the way the whole time, and Gufei followed without saying a word. Along the way, they came across many other players that were also following the flames of torches just like him. He found this to be rather strange even though other players did not seem to share the same sentiment. Continuing along in this manner, It was not long before they left the city gates and continued onward. The voices of players conversing or merely just passing by slowly faded. "Watch your steps." A voice broke the ongoing silence at this moment. Gufei lowered his head and saw that the two of them were no longer walking on paved road and were, instead, traversing through ruins with plenty of vegetation and strewn rubble around them which served as impediments. Gufei followed along, turning and winding along, as he thought to himself that the robbers from Xiao city were being overly cautious. Given the exceptional weather condition of this city, was there still a need to bring their victims all the way to somewhere so inaccessible? Finally, the glowing flame before him stopped moving, so Gufei came to a stop as well. A trap could be lying in front of him, so he did not wish to blindly risk this possibility and jump right into it. Standing still, he silently sensed his surroundings. There was no one, or perhaps, they were all in the fog. The point was that, besides the ruins, nothing else was around him. "This is the place," the person said. "Alright. So what's all this about?" Gufei asked. "Bro, you're not from around here, are you?" This person asked back, instead. "That's right," he confirmed. "Where you're from or where you're going is no concern to us, but you seem to have a quest in the government city hall as well, which means we have something in common," this person continued. "We? That's right, we," someone repeated as human figures began to reveal themselves from the fog. 1, 2, 3. A total of 8 players began to come into view. Gufei was about to take a look and see who they were, when they came to a sudden halt. "Bro, you don't seem to have cover on your face," one of them stated. "Cover?" Gufei was disappointed. "That's right. We cover our faces because we don't wish for each of us to know the other's identity. As an outsider, you may not to stay in Xiao city for long, so you won't mind this, but I think it's still best if we remind you of this man explained. "Well, in that case. When in Rome." Gufei reached into his dimensional pocket for a bandana and quickly covered his face with it. Following this, he saw one of the people raise his hand, and, in the next moment, a black bundle came flying toward Gufei. This bundle unfurled itself halfway through its sail to the air. It was actually a large black poncho. Seeing that the wind was about to take it away, Gufei hurriedly extended his sword and hooked it back to him. "This is." He was hesitating when the 8 finally stepped forth from the fog. Sure enough, each of them had a similar poncho on their face, looking like octuplets as a result. "So, I gotta wear this?" he asked. "That's up to you. That poncho bears a number associated with each of us," one of them answered. "Number?" The person nodded. "Haven't I just mentioned that we don't personally know one another and only temporarily banded together due to having a quest of our own within the place? But because we're about to face flower gazing in the fog, the strongest guild in Xiao city, none of us wishes to leave any possible traces that can cause us trouble in the future. As such, we have no choice but to shroud ourselves in mystery like this." While explaining this, the person indicated the corner of his poncho where the number 4 was sewn to Gufei. Gufei quickly looked at the same corner of his poncho and saw the number 9 sewn on it. "We don't know one another's name, so we'll address each other by our number. You can call me 4, I'll see 1, or Lao see 2. It's your pick, but don't you ever call me Xiao C3. "I hate how it sounds," said the player with the number 4. "Don't ever call me Lauer," said the player with the number 2. "Don't call me Xiao San," said the player with the number 3. "You're all welcome to call me Lao Ba 4, said the player with the number 8. Gufei quietly donned that poncho as he nodded. "I don't mind. Call me whatever. Since you've accepted this, can I take it that you are clear on why we are gathered here and called you to join us?" 4 asked. "While nobody has explicitly said it, I think I more or less got the gist of things," Gufei replied. "You guys must be probably players that have gotten competitive quests against the flower gazing in the fog, and you all gathered here in hopes of accomplishing it, am I right?" "Yes," 4 affirmed. "Too many players have given up their quests when they saw the need to go against the flower gazing in the fog, while there were plenty that have given up after failing. I'm afraid all that is left is just the 9 of us," 4 continued. "Then, surely you have to share what's the content of your quest, yeah? Spit it out so we can better work together on achieving it," Gufei suggested. "Of course," 4 said, as the 8 men gave a brief overview of their quest description. "When that is all over, They turned the question toward Gufei. How about you? Me? Assassinate Giordano, Gufei replied simply. Even though they were wearing cover on their faces, he could still sense their expression of surprise. Prepared to go up against flower gazing in the fog's quest, these men had nationally done their due diligence and were well aware that the NPC Giordano was an important character to the guild quest. Killing off this NPC would likely result in the total failure of flower gazing in the fog's quest, right? Of course, these men were not thinking for the sake of flower gazing in the fog. After their momentary astonishment, they immediately pressed on. What have you gotten so far? Giordano is in the Vigilante core chamber on the 3rd floor, but at the same time, there are plenty of guards around, so it isn't easy to strike there. While it will leave the safety of the government city hall and patrol the grounds at daytime, there are still way too many guards within the courtyard, including those players from flower gazing in the fog watching the area like hawks. I have yet to find a good opportunity at the moment, Gufei shared. The 8 nodded their heads incessantly when 6 suddenly called out, besides that, you seem to know something else? Oh, what's that? What method did you use to escape from the watchful gazes of all the players from that guild and suddenly appear right outside the entrance to the city hall? Asked 6. Hee. Gufei chuckled. Talking about that, why don't you guys share what information you guys have gleaned thus far, too? This gang did not talk about identity or friendship and was merely freely exchanging information with one another. Since Gufei was now a part of this gang, he figured he should adhere to the rules. He could not possibly allow himself to be used and expect nothing in return, right? Thus, before he showed his hand, he naturally wanted to first get more information from them. This was to see if it was worth exchanging information with them. In the end, 4 sighed. If we had already gotten enough information ourselves, we would have already completed our quest. Why else would we still come here and discuss the matter like this? Perhaps, what you know is the last piece of the puzzle to the completion of our quests. Well, in that case, show me what you've got. Gufei said. Fine. Let me tell you in detail. 4 squatted, randomly picked up a twig, and began drawing on the ground. Gufei could tell that the man was drawing out a rough sketch of the city hall's courtyard. Forming a circle in the dirt, placing stones, and drawing arrows, he began to describe in great detail all the NPC activities within the courtyard. Chapter 464, Teamwork. Gufei was not only listening diligently but also writing down everything in his booklet, really putting in all his effort into this. He originally thought that he would have to spend hours up on the wall to get a clear picture of the entire compound, but who would have guessed that these 8 players in the ruins would save him the trouble? Who knew how long these players had been secretly staking out the courtyard, such that they were able to get such a detailed account of its ground layout? Furthermore, not only did they fully grasp the NPC guards' movement, they even made sure to take note of the habits and activities of the members from flower gazing in the fog across several days, since that guild was what they were viewing as the important enemy here. Gufei listened and nodded, his quill scribbling furiously. 4 looked to be very pleased with his attitude, so he got more encouraged as he continued. Not only did he give an overview of the situation, he went a step further to explain what he could. He even told Gufei of the plans that they came up with but failed to implement. Right now, the most troublesome thing is our inability to grasp just how many stealthed thieves are skulking in the courtyard, so we can't get any headway in our quests. 4 finally expressed his anxiety over the matter. One more thing. Standing beside him, 3 took the twig from 4 and circled the government city hall and the area behind it. There's a backyard here, but because the building is covering it, we have no idea what's the situation in that place. My and 7's quests need us to be there, so there's nothing in the backyard, no guards or members from flower gazing in the fog, Gufei informed. You've been there? 3 and 7 were excited to hear this. Yup. Gufei nodded. How did you do it? The 8 of them all turned to regard him. Have you guys never considered climbing the wall? Gufei stared right back at the 8. Wall? The 8 muttered. In their minds, that was not a wall. Stretching over 10 meters high, that was already at the same height as a building. Who would even think of climbing a 5-story high building if it were in the way? You can climb up that wall? The 8 cautiously asked. It's possible with the right tools, Gufei affirmed. You probably climbed in from the backyard, which is how you managed to get yourself to the entrance without anyone noticing it. These people rejoiced at uncovering this fact. That's more or less accurate. Gufei said, but, there's still another problem. What will that be? The 8 fixed their gazes on him. Gufei pointed toward the rough sketch of the city hall in the circle on the ground. You guys should already know about the building being inaccessible to players. Besides 3, 7, and 8, the rest of you have quests within the building itself. Have any of you managed to confirm if they will grant access to the government city hall because you picked up the quest? Several of them expressed their chagrin. We'll be able to find out if we just give this a test, but those guys from flower gazing in the fog won't even let us get near it. So you guys have no idea. Gufei said. These men were all rueful. Well, now that we have a method to get over the wall and enter the backyard, what else is there to worry about? Won't all our troubles be resolved if we head over and give it a shot? These men asked. Gufei, however, shook his head. I doubt we can climb the wall and get over any longer. Why is that? My sudden appearance right outside the government city hall's entrance have me surrounded. Isn't it weird that they didn't bother to ask me how I managed to appear like that, and they even let me off in the end? Gufei wondered aloud. That's true. The others were astonished. Without needing to ask, there's only one possibility. They already determined that that is how I got in. At the very least, they would be sure to have someone watch over the backyard from here onward. I doubt that they'll simply cling on to guarding just the entrance alone anymore. Gufei sighed. Looks like my action today has created even more trouble for our quests. That's entirely logical. 3 sighs of flowing maple is not your average gamer. He's sure to have thought of this point. 3 blurted out. Oh, do you two know each other? Someone beside him instantly asked. 3 did not say another word. There's another thing as well. At night in game, the entire building will be on lockdown. Even players with permission to enter won't be let off, Gufei said. How do you know of this? 4 asked. Because I happen to be a player that has access, Gufei replied. Are you cool, Apple? 4 croaked. The others looked flustered as well, and they abruptly distanced themselves from Gufei. Gufei shook his head. Didn't you guys deduce that I'm not from around here? How could I be cool, Apple, then? After the rest of them had calmed down, Gufei continued, speaking of which, since you guys know that Cool Apple is a player that has access, have none of you ever considered locating him to find out more about the situation? After all, 5 out of the 8 of you need to enter the building to complete your quest. 4 laughed bitterly. It isn't that we haven't thought of this possibility, but that Cool Apple isn't an easy man to locate. He would have long been shredded to pieces by others and would have never survived for so long as he did if that hadn't been the case. Gufei nodded his head. Even though we are unable to enter the government city hall at night, we can still try your method of climbing that wall to take a look at the situation in the backyard. After all, it is purely your speculation that this method may no longer work, 4 said. Sure. Gufei nodded. Is there anything else? 4 asked. Yes. Gufei tugged at the poncho he had on. Who made this? I did. 2 raised his hand. The inspiration for the design of this poncho came from the Akatsuki of Naruto. The number sewn on it imitates the style of the leader's attire from Bleach. 2 gushed in delight. Gufei nodded and said, if you intend to hide your identity, you shouldn't reveal your hobby like this, or you'll end up getting exposed. Not only 2, even the others were shocked when they heard this, and they began to examine themselves. Let's go, then. Gufei got up. We're leaving. 4 called out to the rest. Gufei, currently bearing the number 9, walked at the tail end of these men, as he resumed his silent observation of the 8 players. Teamwork would have to be based on mutual trust. Gufei had absolutely no faith in this group of players that had banded together solely for the benefits of working together, yet refused to reveal their identities to one another. The only common ground they shared was that the quests all 9 of them had picked up were in direct conflict with flower gazing in the fog. In addition, the content of the quests differed from one another, so in the process of this operation, and someone completed the first step of their quest, would that person continue to provide aid for the rest in completing their quests? Gufei felt that was a big question. Gufei followed someone with a fast movement speed when he was making his way over to the meeting point, but now that they were heading back to the government city hall, It was apparent that someone from within the group had quite a slow movement speed, which cost them quite a bit of time. He raised his head to the sky and thought to himself, at the speed we are going, it will soon be daylight before we arrive there. There should really be a more appropriate form of transportation in this game, or it would be unfair to these job classes that had slow movement speed, since they had to waste quite some time traveling from place to place when grinding. Leaving the ruins, the group made their way back on the main road. They maintained a certain distance from one another, with nobody chatting with anyone. As they neared the city proper, someone began to remove the poncho they were wearing, since wearing such an odd piece of clothing would be a surefire way to call attention to themselves. Honestly speaking, people who intended to secretly partake in wrongdoings should not dress up so outstandingly like this. Getting each of them to wear the same article of clothing was extremely foolish and should only be applied to something like doing a public demonstration. Gufei did not really mind, so he continued to have it on, and two appeared to be very taken by his or her creation. While the others chose to take it off, he was still wearing the poncho as they trudged on. Gufei slowly neared him and softly asked, "Was it your idea to make these?" "Yup." "What about it?" Chu asked. "Nothing really." "These numbers we are given?" Gufei asked as he pointed to the number 9 sewn to the corner of the clothing. "Is this based off the sequence when we joined this gang?" "That's right." Chu confirmed. "So how many of these did you make in the first place?" Gufei asked. 13, Chu answered. "What? Why is it 13? Gufei was shocked. He recalled how Andrew Su's diary once mentioned the very same number, with the Shadow Mist assassin claiming he was 13 assignments away from hitting the 200 mark, even going as far as to say that it was ominous. Have you never watched Bleach?" "Alright, I get it," Gufei said. It seemed that this was only a coincidence. The 9 of them finally made it right outside the government city hall's courtyard. After confirming that there were no other players around, he led the 8 others over to the wall that's surrounding the backyard. "Can you really get up this?" The 8 began to inspect the wall before them. "I've already told you guys it's doable with the right tools." Gufei fished out a grappling hook and deftly tossed it out and snagged the top of the wall. Where did you get this sort of thing?" This was the first time these 8 players had seen such an equipment, and they asked the same question everybody else asked when they first saw him use it. "I made it myself." Gufei was a little exasperated that he had to explain this so many times. Why is it that these gamers are so set in their ways and thinking, is the system the only one that can provide items and tools? Don't they know how to make things themselves? One of them has clearly even sewn together a poncho of this for everyone, so why can't they even conceive of such a possibility? "Do we just climb up like this?" 4 came over and tugged at the rope, attempting to confirm if it was sturdy enough. "It might be a little difficult at the start, so everyone should slowly practice and get used to it." Gufei set us through 2 hooks at one go. He had really made plenty of these at one go. Gufei promptly began to give everyone a lesson on how to climb walls with a grappling hook right under that wall. However, it was clear that none of these 8 had the talent like he and Zizu. While they were able to maybe get a few steps in, they were unable to last all the way through to the top. They would always make a mistake halfway through or lose their balance. Some even ended up swaying about, which caused the hook to loosen as the players fell to the ground. 7. Don't use so much strength when climbing the wall. All your legs have to do is stabilize the body. It's mainly about your arms, both of them. 4. Why are you always leaning to your left? Don't depend on just one leg to hold you up. You need both legs. Both. 3. Don't be so anxious, slow down. What? You don't have enough strength? Then, hurry up a little. Go, go, go. 6. What are you doing? Get down. This can only hold the weight of a single person. Gufei was squatting alone at the base of the wall, lifting his head up from time to time to correct and advise the 8 of them. He sighed when it was finally over. "It's almost daytime. If everything goes smoothly, we'll be able to enter the government city hall once we make our way past this wall." "Alright." The 8 was perspiring profusely as they pressed on to keep practicing. Chapter 465, Attack from Above. As Gufei had expected, daylight was already breaking by the time the 8 men were standing atop the wall. He casually grabbed hold of a rope and climbed up with ease, savagely leaving the 8 with a sense of inferiority while they were in the middle of basking in the morning glow and celebrating their triumph over the wall climb. The night in game did not have pitch black darkness, but the change brought forth by the sunrise was still substantial. The beauty of sunrise was not in the least bit marred by the lack of total darkness at night. However, it was impossible to witness this inside the city, so all Gufei could do was watch as the fog around him become clearer. Players who can stand living here in the city must surely be exceedingly patient. This fog has caused them to miss out quite a lot of things, Gufei thought to himself even as he began keeping the grappling hooks. Anyone down below? Gufei turned to casually ask when he saw the 8 of them already cautiously poking their heads past to see the situation at the backyard of the government city hall. There are so many people there, they said. Is that so? Gufei hurriedly came over to poke his head and check as well, even taking out his spyglass to get a closer look. Players, looks like flower gazing in the fog have truly taken the necessary precautions. Gufei sighed as he confirmed that these players were nowhere present last night. The 8 of them were all surprised when they saw the spyglass that Gufei was holding. Did you make that as well? Chu asked wearily. Nope. I borrowed this, Gufei quickly answered. He suspected that the 8 might think of him as some almighty crafter. And another piece of bad news, Gufei said. I think somebody saw me when I poked my head out previously. Hearing how calm Gufei sounded, the 8 all felt rather ashamed. Exchanging glances with one another, the 8 all nodded their heads in unison. Actually, I think we got spotted as well. Since the members of Flower Gazing in the Fog knew that somebody would be climbing over the wall, it was only natural that they would focus their attention over and keep their eyes on the wall. Those players did not miss one of the 9 heads poking out. However, the 8 of them chose to keep mum over the fact despite having been found out, afraid that the others would criticize them for making this mistake. However, as it turned out, not one of them had escaped this fate. It was only when Gufei calmly mentioned that he had been discovered that the 8 guilty persons looked at one another and realized that everybody had done the same. Truly, a terrible gang, Gufei thought to himself. Even such a simple detail intimates the many problems they have. Not only do the 8 of them not trust each other, none of them is even willing to assume responsibilities. They are all mixing in with the group for their needs. It seems that none of them has thought to consider what their responsibilities are, or on whether they should show any consideration for the circumstances of the others. What do we do now? The 8 men looked at one another. How did he do it? Would he still come back in the same manner? 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple and his comrades asked this before sending men over to guard the backyard. How did he even get over the 10-meter wall that encloses the backyard? Someone asked. He's sure to have his ways, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple said. All we need to do is put up a proper defense, so that he won't beat a retreat in the face of difficulties. This was essentially the guidelines that 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple had chosen to work with for this quest, which was also the main reason he had let Gufei off so easily like that. 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple did not wish to start a fight with other players in the courtyard, for he was worried that doing so would deduct the completion progress of their quest. As such, he tried to place as many members as he could so openly in hopes that such preventive measures would deter players from attempting anything foolish. This is indeed for the best. The rest nodded. They had always been supportive of 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple's guidelines. Get our men to defend the backyard. Everybody will have to work harder now that we are in the final stretch, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple said. There was no longer anything left that they could actively participate to increase the completion percentage, but the peaceful days they managed to maintain meant that they would nevertheless see steady progression each day. Flower Gazing in the Fog had no other options either, so all they could depend on was this slow accumulation till they reached 100%. This alone might not be enough to deter that man from trying. Drifting could not help but speak up. Even though 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple had invited him to be a part of this discussion with the core members of the guild, he was well aware that the members of this guild did not have any sort of blind idolization toward him just because of his status as one of the 5 unyielding experts. He might be seated at the same table with all these other players, but that did not mean that they saw him on equal footing. Knowing that his words did not carry much weight, Drifting did not bother to speak initially. He had intended to merely sit in and listen to their discussion, yet he could not stand it in the end. From his perspective, Drifting felt that the solutions these men had proposed were not in the least bit threatening to Gufei, as all these men had sorely underestimated his prowess. "Brother Drifting, what are your thoughts on this?" asked Three Sides of Flowing Maple. "Nothing really. I merely want to advise you not to underestimate him. He's far stronger than what any of you can imagine," Drifting replied. Drifting knew what he had just said would rub people the wrong way, and sure enough, the lips of over half the players seated twitched visibly. Drifting had no choice either but to shut his mouth. The guild leader, Three Sides of Flowing Maple, did not ignore Drifting's comment, however, and he asked those present, "So should we send more men?" "More men? How many more? Would it be more than the park value he had accumulated that time?" Drifting grimaced yet never said anything aloud. One of the core members was placed in charge of the defense of the backyard. After this person made the necessary arrangement, he giddily announced to everyone present, "I am looking forward to see what that guy is gonna do in the fact of our defense. He'll just slay his way in." Drifting, who had tactfully sat himself down in a corner, could not help but say this under his breath. Slay our way in." Gufei answered precisely in the same manner when the 8 men asked what they should do. "We're gonna force our way in?" The 8 players were all shocked. Such an act was as good as a direct clash against the members from Flower Gazing in the Fog. There were only 9 men on their side, and it seemed far too huge a risk to take. "Their defense here is focused on fending against me alone. The 8 of you are unexpected additions, and that is enough to leave them at a loss on what to do," Gufei said. "At a loss? There are over 20 men down there, I think, and we're but 9 on our side," Two exclaimed. Immediately realizing what Gufei meant, he stared at the mage with incredulous eyes. "Why are they mobilizing 20-odd men just for you? Just who the hell are you?" The rest also realized this point, and they all turned to stare at Gufei. He shrugged. "Didn't we agree not to ask personal details about one another? There's only one chance here," Gufei continued. "They'd already discovered the rest of you just now when you peeked your heads, so since the enemies are now aware that it isn't just me alone, this just might be the only chance you'd have facing only 20 or so men. A defense of 20 plus men is considered as weak?" Chu was astonished yet again. "Make your decision." Gufei regarded the 8 players. They exchanged looks with one another and figured that what Gufei had said made sense and quickly nodded their heads to show their agreement. Gufei quickly secured a grappling hook to the top of the wall and said to the 8 of them, "I'm gonna head down first and draw their attention. The rest of you can slide down on your own accord." 3 and 7, "You two search for what you need in the backyard as soon as you can." 8. "Find somewhere to hide yourself in the backyard and make a dash over to the courtyard to look for a chance to find the quest NPC you are looking for. You've got a fast movement speed, so that should not be too difficult for you." 3, 7, and 8 each nodded in acknowledgement at this when they were called accordingly. "The rest of you, see if you have the permission to enter the premises using that door right ahead. If you are not given access to the government city hall, immediately retreat back to the rope here and leave. We'll make plans for you guys next time," Gufei said. "Alright." The others nodded. "Then, let's not waste any more time and get a move on. I'll go first." Gufei tossed the rope over the wall as he finished his statement, leaping off with one hand on the rope and sliding down in one smooth motion. "Over here!" Shouts rang across the yard in an instant. The position Gufei had selected was closest to the back door, so as to reduce the amount of time it took for the others to make their way into the government city hall proper. This was also the place where half of the men were concentrated in, exactly as how Gufei had intended. "Gather around everyone, so it's easier for me to kill you all in one shot." As the 8 up on the wall heard the ruckus below, all their heads poked out, and they saw Gufei slide down the rope before suddenly running up the wall and leaping off it. A sword appeared in his hand mid-air. The sword flashed and flourished as he fell downward, a flaming glow that danced like an undulating dragon circled around him. "That's..." Someone seemed to have thought to say something among the 8. "What are you all still hesitating for? Quickly get down." 3 of them had already grabbed the ropes and went over the wall to slide down. Screams could be heard by the edge of the wall. Gufei's attack from above was a literal attack to their heads. The twin incineration that carved forth slashed right onto the enemies' heads. 4 players were insta-killed in the first moment, while the other three went pale after the sword sliced them. Their HP abruptly dipped into the red as they scrambled to retreat. Gu Fei landed firmly on the ground. He proceeded to take one step forward while turning to complete a 900-degree twin incineration. It was almost as if these players surrounding him had previously discussed how they would easily be insta-killed by him. This twist left no one around him any longer. That 900-degree turn meant 2.5 revolutions. Even the players with the highest HP had no way of surviving 2 brushes of Gu Fei's twin incineration. Having the skill to forcefully apply one spell twice on any player like this only showed the extent of Gu Fei's expertise to subvert the system's design in such a manner. After this grand display of his prowess, the players from Flower Gazing in the Fog began to feel their heart palpitate unevenly. Their charge to surround this interloper was no longer as sure-footed as before. The 3 that had slid down from the wall already got into position. A mage and an archer each unleashed their attacks on the enemies. "Those of you still on top, hurry up!" Gu Fei shouted as he took the initiative to attack, diving straight toward the back door. While he was descending, many members from Flower Gazing in the Fog had withdrawn back toward the front of the store. Evidently, they had been assigned their positions prior the engagement. Gu Fei had already expected this and made a point to conserve enough mana to deal with them. Another 3 of the remaining 5 men on the wall slid down the ropes, and it happened to be 3, 7, and 8. Gu Fei hurtled toward the back door as the players from Flower Gazing of the Fog anxiously dashed over to provide assistance. 3 and 7 began their mad search in the backyard while no one was looking. 8 had already spied a certain thicket that he could use, diving in headfirst at breakneck speed and concealing himself within. The final 2 began to slide down the rope even as a dent could be heard from both the front and the back of the government city hall. The reinforcement from Flower Gazing in the Fog was already hurrying over at this time. When those defenders had first noted the 9 heads poking out from the wall above, they had made sure to inform their guild leader of this. 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple was surprised that there would be so many enemies, so he of course quickly sent more of his men over to deal with this change. Chapter 466, The Underestimated 9. That was quick. Gu Fei sighed. This was all thanks to those 8 other players. Had the first of them honestly admitted to the rest that there were plenty of people below and that he was spotted, the rest would no longer have had to expose themselves and Flower Gazing in the Fog would not have known that there were 9 players hiding on the wall's walkway, which meant that they would not have immediately called for reinforcement. This would also provide more time for Gu Fei and the gang to break through the back door. Right now, however, they only managed to cover half the distance to the back door, yet a good majority of their enemies was already there to pincer them from 2 sides. The arrival of this reinforcement helped in raising the flagging morale of the players originally defending this entry point. The fear that was originally created upon witnessing Gu Fei's uninhibited slaying of those players around him dissipated, as everybody rallied and came forth to surround Gu Fei and the others. Quick continued to press on. Gu Fei realized that the gang beside him seemed to be wavering the moment they saw the reinforcement arrive, so he hurriedly bellowed for these men to gather their wits about them and to avoid letting their minds wander. In the end, it was one who was the first out of the 9 to take a step back, muttering, "No way. This is surely impossible. I already told you guys that this is impossible." The man turned around to make a dash for it after saying all that, intending to get back to the rope hung by the wall and escape. Gu Fei knitted his eyebrows yet did not move to stop the man. All he did was turn to regard the others. "Those who wish to flee, now's your chance, or you won't be able to make it any longer." The men hesitated and wavered, but a scream from behind soon forced them into a decision. "Let's continue onward." One, who had turned around to flee, was immediately decimated. Some of the ranged players from Flower Gazing in the Fog hurled a salvo of their attacks over to that man in unison, instantly turning him into white light. Even though they had no wish to park within the city hall grounds, men from Flower Gazing in the Fog had already been slain by someone else, so they were no longer following this particular guideline. Even 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple gave them this directive: do not leave a single one of these men alive. Prioritize killing those who attempt to flee. Now that the situation had escalated to such a stage, there was no need to show any bit of mercy. Otherwise, if words got out that players could breach their defense on a whim and escape unscathed, that would only attract even more potential troublemakers to the government city hall. 3 Size of Flowing Maple was extremely decisive when he came to this conclusion. It just so happened that one had unwittingly been in the crosshair of this command and gotten annihilated as a result. Once the rest realized that retreating was far more dangerous than advancing forward, all they could do was still themselves and charge toward their goal. "We can make it for sure," Gufei encouraged them, taking the lead of this charge with that weak mage body of his. The warrior among them felt a little ashamed at this and was inspired by his bravery, so he strode forward and advanced with Gufei as well. "Don't let them get anywhere near the door." 3 Size of Flowing Maple yelled this over the guild channel. There were several members stationed right before the door. They could not help but break out in a cold sweat when they saw Gufei brave the enfilade of ranged attacks as he sprinted right toward them, his killing intent emanating threateningly. These members clustered together in hopes of supporting one another. The ranged job classes among them were the first to launch an attack, but Gufei easily shrugged off this attempt and soon came right up to them. Many of them tried to wield their weapons to attack the mage, but somehow, Gufei managed to effortlessly weave his sword through the web of their attacks when his sword swung forth. To Gufei, these normal gamers waving their weapons menacingly were so full of flaws that he could not even count them all at one glance. He would simply be insulting his 12 years of grueling kung fu training if he was unable to take all these people down in one move. A flash of flames appeared as Gufei easily broke through that clump of players. 3 Size of Flowing Maple slapped his thigh when he saw the glaringly bright white light in the distance, wishing he could just fly over to Gufei and block his advance. Right now, he was feeling that Drifting's words were simply unacceptable. How could anyone even underestimate this man in any capacity? He was essentially an existence whose power went well beyond anyone's imagination. Even though the road ahead was clear, some of the players accompanying Gufei were unable to match his speed, while the others had been constantly evading the enemy's ranged attacks the entire time, so they were unable to be as quick as him as well. However, once they saw that the obstacles in their way were now gone, these men disregarded everything else and made a mad charge forward. This was the only path left for them. There was no time for any of them to test anything. Death was all that awaited anyone who did not have the permission to enter the government city hall. Even if they successfully made it into the building, what could the players from Flower Gazing in the Fog do? The gang had no idea. But Gufei had already predicted that the players from Flower Gazing in the Fog did not have access to the building. That was because they had never once stood in line with the NPC guards by the door. Safety was guaranteed as long as they made it into the government city hall. "Come on, you'll be safe once you're inside," Gufei shouted. He had basically done all that he could. It was now up to them to successfully make their way into the building. Everything hinged on their job classes, equipment, reaction, and luck. At the same time, Gufei's eyes searched throughout the backyard for traces of 3, 7, and 8. The attention of the members from Flower Gazing in the Fog were all concentrated on Gufei and the others as they did their best to stop them. 7 was running about in the backyard, hiding from time to time, yet nobody seemed to note his presence. Meanwhile, the thicket that 8 had dove into was trembling ever so slightly. Seeing the branches and leaves rustle, Gufei reckoned that person was probably crawling his way toward the main courtyard. As for 3, Gufei was unable to see any traces of 3 after quickly scanning through the courtyard once. Gufei recalled that the man had been searching with 7 at the start, so where was he right now? Was he slain? Gufei had not noticed this. At this time, the 4 other players from the gang following Gufei finally made it over without losing their lives in the process. Among them, 4 was already staggering over, looking as if he was tethering on cusp of death. Gufei rushed over to him with a swipe of his sword, helping them swat away several arrows as he turned his head. "Quickly get in." These men were touched and slightly remorseful when they saw that Gufei did not abandon them and was even coming to their aid. As these players hurried into the government city hall, the NPC guards by the door remained unmoving like wooden dummies. "You guys have permission to enter." Gufei was happy for them. As these men followed one after another through the door, the arm from one of the guards suddenly shot forth at the last player. That man anxiously leapt back in the last moment, turning over to look at Gufei with sadness. "I don't seem to have permission to enter." This person was 2. Gufei was disappointed as well. It was impossible to force their way through with the guards stationed here, but there was no option to retreat. Either death was the only outcome if they stayed there. Gufei turned back and saw the look of terror on Seven, who was still searching frantically through the backyard. According to the plan, he would attempt his quest while the flower gazing in the fog was focusing on the others that were making a dash for the back door. Once this opportunity passed, he would easily be located by the members of flower gazing in the fog. Now that this moment was potentially upon him, he hurriedly thought to locate a hiding spot near him, but was unable to make a decision in that split second. What made it worse was the fact that the moment the players from flower gazing in the fog saw these trespassers enter the government city hall one by one, somebody shifted his gaze away in frustration and coincidentally discovered Seven standing there. Nevertheless, Gufei had already come up with a plan in that moment as he padded to stay here and wait. The two guards will be leaving soon, so you can use that chance to enter. Don't move once you enter and immediately hide behind the door, got it? What? Chu was in a bit of a daze. Just do as I instructed. Gufei did not have the time to explain in detail and just promptly turned around and dashed out. Where are you going? Chu yelped in his astonishment. His eyes followed close and realized that Gufei was running toward where Seven was standing. Is he running over to help him? Chu was moved. He held quite a bit of hope for this haphazardly formed ragtag band at first and felt that their common goal, which was also what was holding everybody together as they worked in secrecy to achieve them, was interesting and mysterious. However, he quickly realized that the distrust toward one another and their honest relationship of using one another left a bad taste in his mouth. And what made it scarier was how it seemed as if his sentiment was shared by everybody else. Was reality really so different from the fictional world of manga? Just as he was feeling rueful over this fact, a ninth player suddenly joined their ranks. Originally, he did not think much of this newcomer as well, but Gufei at least paid a little attention to the poncho he had sewn and even continued to wear it. Chu felt rather consoled by this. Now, seeing Gufei's selflessness in this battle, it really made him feel as if he had found that feeling he wanted to experience. Reality was not uninteresting, after all. Meanwhile, Gufei, who had no idea that someone had just been inspired by him, rushed over to Seven's side in a hurry. Waving his arms, he shouted, "What are you standing there in a daze for?" Seven snapped out of his daze, but he was still at a loss on what to do when he saw men dashing toward him from all sides. Keep looking for your quest. Gufei spat out the apple in his mouth. After he had taken care of all the obstacles along the way, he immediately began consuming fruit to replenish his mana. It was not fully restored right now, but at least he had enough to provide support. I don't know where it is. Seven was a little hysterical at this point. What nonsense! Why would your quest giver ask you to search if you already know where it is? What's your quest? Everybody had only given a brief description of their quests back then and did not go in depth about them. The lethargic assassin, Seven replied. What? Gufei did not get what that had to do with what Seven was searching for. Seven anxiously explained in detail. It wants me to search for a slumbering assassin. You're looking for a living breathing NPC? How haven't you found it after searching for all this time? Gufei exclaimed. Seven's objective was huge. Seven felt ashamed. Use your head. Who would fall asleep in the open field like that? What's more, this NPC is an assassin, so it's sure to have hidden itself well. Concentrate on areas like that. Gufei shouted even as he turned around, for those players from flower gazing in the fog had made it to where he was. Gufei stepped forward as he swung his sword out. The man quickly moved his dagger to block the blow, but this strike from Gufei was only a feint, and he had already adjusted his attack to land on the next person. Several of the enemies fell for this trick and raised their weapons to meet his attack. Gufei took 2 steps backward, and these men walked forward in 1 step, which happened to line them all up, allowing Gufei to perform a soul-stirring twin incineration. Seven was stupefied by what he had just witnessed. Gufei's way of fighting seemed as if he were pulling monsters, gathering them together, and slaying a group of them in one fell swoop. Does this guy treat the enemy players like monsters? 9 is seriously too scary. Gufei turned his gaze over to the 2 guards stationed right by the government city hall. My park value has already risen to 20 points, why aren't those 2 coming over? Chapter 467, running all over players that had park value of 20 to 30 points would cause the system to send out guards after them, But that did not mean stationary guards would let those in their sight to get away scot-free. Goofy wanted to generate this very reaction from the two NPC guards stationed at the back door of the government city hall. Just as he had hoped, the sharp eyes of the guards shifted and very quickly identified him as a fugitive with over 20 park points. They began to rush to where he was. 2, who was feeling very puzzled by Goofy's instructions moments ago, saw the two guards leave their post. Naturally, he was unaware that he had intentionally used this simple stipulation to generate such an effect. All he thought was that 9 was becoming more and more mystical with every passing moment. "Quickly get in!" Goofy shouted to him. 2 no longer hesitated and dashed right into the back door, following Goofy's instruction to the letter. He instantly ducked in a corner behind one of the double doors and did not take a step further. As for the two guards, Goofy already had plenty of dealings with such NPCs in the past. Because these two had their stations to hold, there was no way either would leave too far from their original posts, so all he had to do was escape their range. This worked similarly to how players could escape from the usual monsters out in the grinding maps by getting out of their aggro range. Thus, the members of Flower Gazing in the Fog were more of a problem to him at the moment. These players were already infuriated when they saw that a good half of the 9 trespassers had successfully entered the government city hall, so all the anger in them could only be released onto the two targets right before their eyes. Although the backyard was smaller than the government city hall's courtyard, their scope of vision here was not as wide as in the courtyard since plenty of obstructions and hiding spots existed all over. Goofy was dragging 7 along with him and was currently engaged in a game of hide-and-seek, so the members of Flower Gazing in the Fog simply had no means to vent their anger. Each man was on the verge of having a stroke as they repressed their burning rage. "Just who are these people?" was the first question 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple asked his guild members. "We don't know. They're all wearing face covers." Such an answer was also very vexing for them all, as it meant that they did not even have a chance to take revenge in the future. "Damn it." The usually calm and collected 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple finally spat out an expletive. "We must find those two guys." Yes. Everybody was very confident of this. While they had no idea where the 2 men were hiding, the backyard was only so big. Locating the 2 men would only be a matter of time. 7, who was hiding all over the place with Goofy, was feeling extremely nervous right now. He trembled at every disorderly footstep he heard around them. "We can't continue hiding like this." "Hide?" Goofy turned to stare at the man. "We're currently searching for your quest target, bro." "Q quest?" 7 almost forgot about his reason for being here in his anxiety. "Aren't we looking for that lethargic assassin?" Goofy asked even as he continued to search all about. "Over here!" A shout suddenly rang through the backyard. Following this, they heard many mages starting to loudly chant. 7, who abruptly lay flat on the ground in fright, heard Goofy sigh. "It's not us. It's 8. Their mass search for the 2 men ended up uncovering 8. Instead, the man was hiding in the thicket. Speaking of which, 8 was perhaps too passive in dealing with the enemies. He became overly cautious when he saw more and more players from Flower Gazing in the Fog gathering and moved far too slowly, ending up dead once the enemies caught up to him. "We killed one," those players excitedly announced as they continued their search. "Snap out of it and hurry." Goofy was entirely unaffected as he continued to spur 7 on. Hard work paid off. But more importantly, Goofy's line of thinking was spot on. Searching for the slumbering assassin meant that they had to look for a suitable spot for it to sleep. They finally located their NPC under a big tree, hugging the shrub and sleeping soundly as if it were dead to the world. Just how tired must this assassin NPC be feeling for it to end up sleeping in a place like this? Goofy wondered as he saw 7 lower his head and interact with the NPC before getting up to say, "It's done." "Why isn't it waking up?" Goofy asked. "I don't know." 7 replied. "Anyway, the quest is completed, so I can return to hand it in." Goofy nodded his head as he kept his ear to the ground for the cacophony of footsteps around them. He spoke to 7, "Stay here and don't move." "What?" 7 was nonplussed. "I'm gonna go lure them away," Goofy said. "Ah, thank you so much." 7 was warmed. He had really met a real-life Feng one. "Don't mention it. My quest is in the building, so I got to get in." Luring them away just happened to be something I can do on my way there. "You're lucky 8 has become your scapegoat," Goofy said. 7 was momentarily stunned before realizing what he meant. Flower gazing in the fog had set their sights on the two of them. With 8's death, they would only have one target left in mind, and that would be Goofy as he ran to the government city hall. This meant that 7 would no longer be in any sort of danger, which made 8 his incidental scapegoat. "I'm off." Goofy said his goodbye and then dashed out from the shrubbery. "Over here!" A shout rang about just like last time. Following this, another bunch of mages began to loudly chant their spells. However, Goofy was not like their previous target and was not even ruffled by this circumstance. How would mere spells even hit him? Everybody saw Goofy speed off in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a trail of mage fire bombardment as he ran. The archers were similarly unable to lock their shots on this speedy figure. Meanwhile, the homing projectiles that they fired off had limited speed, so Goofy easily bat them away. The whole lot of them was hopping mad, yelling as they rushed to surround Goofy. The final unlucky ones were naturally those players he was running straight toward. An unrelenting slash sent 2 players down to the ground as he trod on them and went past. Goofy avoided insta-killing any of them not out of mercy but because he did not want to increase his park value further. While the players from Flower Gazing in the Fog were plentiful, it was instead the 2 guards that Goofy found to be far more troublesome opponents. At the moment, he had already entered the range of the 2, and upon perceiving him to be a fugitive, the 2 bravely left their post. Goofy came charging to them head-on, but right in the moment before he clashed into these guards, he promptly blinked away with a swish hand appeared behind them. He was hoping to use that extra distance he had gained to make it into the government city hall. Only then would he consider his next step. The resulting racket behind him caused Goofy to look backward, only to discover that the men from Flower Gazing in the Fog, who had been attacking him as they gave chase, ended up hitting the guards with their attacks instead, thanks to his sudden and inexplicable disappearance using Blink. This was truly an unexpected trouble, since there was no reason for these guards to ignore the threat generated from these attacks. The 2 abruptly gave up on chasing Goofy as they dashed to confront those brave souls who had accidentally struck these NPC guards. Death was only their secondary concern when they were attacked by these guards. What pained Flower Gazing in the Fog was that their accidental assault on these guards would most likely adversely affect their quest progression. They were supposed to be guarding the courtyard but ended up attacking the NPC guards the system had stationed over there. Instead, it was truly a heinous crime. At this moment, 3 Sighs of Flowing Maple was just about ready to give everything up. He reckoned Giordano would most likely reduce their completion progression down to 0 when they next met. Goofy was feeling quite remorseful about this as well, shrugging to those who were still chasing after him. "I swear that this is not intentional." With that, he bolted right through the double doors and entered the government city hall. Those members from Flower Gazing in the Fog were in severe agony. They urgently needed to vent, yet they did not dare to even touch one blade of grass and a leaf of the trees in this yard. Everybody felt like vomiting blood. 7, who was still hiding in that same spot Goofy had left him, was trembling uncontrollably as he heard this lot of men cry out in exasperation, mentally fighting with himself from giving into his fear. Goofy did not hesitate to turn and hide behind the door once he entered the building, only to find 2 squatting there, unsure of what to do as well. The man was elated when he suddenly saw Goofy arrive. "You're here, too?" "Yup." Goofy nodded before peeking out to check the situation in the intersecting hallway outside. He was well aware of the existence of the guards flanking the wall on either side. The last time he was here, he swaggered through them without one of them flinching, but now that he had 20 park points on him, he did not dare to be as arrogant. Thus, all he could do now was hide here and wait until his park value was reduced by 1 point over time. "What's the gist of your quest here?" Goofy asked. 2's situation was a little more problematic. The man originally did not have permission to be in the government city hall and only managed to sneak his way in thanks to the opportunity Goofy had created for him. While Goofy needed only to wait for his park value's reduction to overcome his current dilemma, what recourse did 2 have if he could not even openly reveal himself at all? My quest. 2 currently had absolute faith toward Goofy, so he did not see a need to hide any bit of information from him. "You're stealing something." "No wonder you don't have the permission," Goofy said as he removed his bandana from his face and used it as a towel to wipe the sweat off his face. He gave a long exhale. I wonder if I'm able to go get the item and pass it over to you, Goofy thoughtfully said. That I have no idea, either. I'll give it a shot later. Goofy decided as he sat to the ground. Chu was confused why he was hiding here and not moving at all. I have 20 park points right now, guards will attack me on sight, so it's easier for me to act after I lose a point, Goofy explained. Chu came to a sudden realization. Finally understanding why those two guards had left their post, he was abruptly overcome with emotions. It was apparent that Goofy had only intentionally increased his park value to 20 points to help him out. Thank you. All Chu could do was express his gratitude through words. Welcome. Goofy was not modest, casually asking, "You're number 2, but you're considered as the eldest among our bunch." Chu was slightly embarrassed. "I just joined earlier than the rest, that's all." "Was one the guy who started it all?" "No. That's 3, Chu answered, but because he preferred the poncho with 3, he took that number." "No wonder." Goofy said. "No wonder what?" Chu asked. "No wonder one was the first to withdraw. I've been finding it strange this whole time. According to the number sequence, if one started all this, he would naturally be more confident in our operation than the rest. He shouldn't have been that hesitant back then." Goofy explained. "You even noticed this detail?" Chu was deeply awed. "But 3 is nowhere to be found," Goofy said. He died?" Chu asked. "I don't know." Goofy shook his head. "I haven't found any traces of the man by the time I took stock of the situation. Someone's here." Goofy suddenly made the hand signal for silence as he heard footsteps coming from outside. Was someone about to enter the government city hall? Sure enough, a figure dashed into the building. Chapter 468, a devious ploy. This person, who was neither flustered nor curious when he stepped into the government city hall with his measured steps, was evidently a player. Goofy peeked from behind the door. He was hoping that the person would turn his head over, but he never once got his wish. He watched as this person walked through the short corridor before turning and disappearing from view. Goofy was stewing in regret when he suddenly heard Chu softly mention, "That's 3. He faced the voice's direction and saw that Chu had also been peeking through the door seam all this while. "How can you tell?" he asked. "Well, it's profession. I'm a little discerning when it comes to a person's physique," Chu replied. Oh. That was when Goofy realized that, although the poncho he was given looked simple, it was actually made by a professional. "Why would 3 come in? Isn't his quest at the backyard?" Chu asked. Goofy stared at the empty hallway before replying, "I suppose this has been his plan all along." "What?" "Gather a group of people together, create a mess in the yard as diversion to sneak into the government city hall," Goofy explained. "What?" Chu was confused. "Is he the one who suggested for everybody to cover their faces?" pressed Goofy. "Ah, yeah," Chu answered. "That's most likely done to make it convenient for his plan. During that battle, having one's face hidden from view was the key indicator of our identity as trespassers. If anyone were to remove their bandana, change their equipment and blend into flower gazing in the fog, those guild members would most likely depend on their guild emblem to distinguish friends from foes and not their faces. So at that time when their targets were clearly identified, it's highly possible for those players to overlook this fact, which made it that much easier for him to blend into the crowd," Goofy explained. "So what our say is?" Chu could feel an icy sensation come over him. From the very beginning, he did not gather everybody out of good fault will. Rather, he's hoping to use us as diversion for him to complete his quest. It's apparent now that his quest is inside the government city hall, but he instead claimed earlier that it is somewhere in the backyard. The point of doing that is to avoid attracting too much attention to him from the very start. He's already considered the fact that flower gazing in the fog would prioritize those attempting to enter the building, Goofy continued. That's too devious," Chu exclaimed. He was already thinking that some players in this haphazardly formed gang would be the selfish sort, but it seemed that was just his naivety, for selfishness was far from being the worst thing about this group. But he shouldn't be too happy so soon. Goofy smirked mirthlessly. "No doubt 3 didn't expect that we would succeed in entering the city hall, or that we would spot him while hiding behind the alcove of this innocuous looking door. Even more so, He would never have considered the possibility of you identifying him just by physique alone. What are you thinking of doing? Chu asked. Teach him a lesson, of course. To leave as deep as an impression as possible, Gu Fei replied. What's your plan? Chu was almost worshipping him. Plan? I don't have any at the moment. Gu Fei sighed. No matter the case, I have to wait till my park value drops by 1 point, or there's no way I can move freely in this building. Those NPC guards are everywhere. So how much longer will that be? Chu asked. Gu Fei heaved an even deeper sigh as he answered, a little over an hour. Actually, I've only recently gotten it to 20, and not much time has passed since. Yeah? Not much at all. Chu confirmed. But if it is a little over an hour, even though we have no idea what Three's quest is about, wouldn't that be enough time for him to accomplish it? It's entirely possible, Gu Fei nodded. But he had overlooked a little problem. What's that? Chu asked. The current situation has totally gone off track from his plan. Many of us didn't die by the hands of flower gazing in the fog and managed to make our way into the government city hall. Instead, think about it, would the guild be kind enough to form up and bid us farewell as we leave? I reckon they've already started to position plenty of their men right outside the front and back doors, awaiting our exit so that they can properly do a show of force, Gu Fei said. This isn't really just a little problem? Chu instantly paled after hearing his explanation, as this matter was not only an issue for Three but for himself as well, given how he was also currently in the government city hall. That guy seems to be focused on the quest at hand that he overlooked this potential problem. He may hold on to his life getting into the building, but can he do the same stepping out? Gu Fei happily chuckled. The expression on Chu's face was not in the least bit happy, but he nevertheless gazed toward Gu Fei expectantly. You should have thought of such a situation, yes? Naturally, Gu Fei affirmed. Chu's spirit rallied somewhat when he heard this. So you've got a plan to leave this place as well? Yup, Gu Fei confirmed. How are we getting out? Chu asked. We're gonna get out exactly the same way we got in. Gu Fei answered. What you mean to say is? Gu Fei clenched his fist confidently. We kill our way out. Chu was speechless. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? I lost consciousness for a second there. Let me just sit down and calm down for a bit. Chu hugged both his legs as he sat behind the door in a dark corner. Okay. Gu Fei nodded. You'll need to expend quite a lot of your energy getting out, so it's best if you rest up. I'll recover a little as well. Gu Fei pulled out an apple and began munching on it once he said his piece. Chu lifted his head and took a look at Gu Fei. He wanted to say something but ended up stopping himself. Right now, all he wanted to do was cry. Bro, do you really think this matter would really be resolved with resting up? At this moment, Chu was feeling exactly what it felt like to be a part of the crew on a pirate boat. Leaning behind the door, Gu Fei was entirely at peace and even felt slightly bored. The space they had was limited, so there was no way he could do some boxing to while his time. Chu looked to have composed himself quite a bit in his corner while Gu Fei did not hold further conversations with him as they passed the time in this manner. I wonder what progress did those other guys make on their quest now that they've gotten in. Gu Fei suddenly wondered to himself. Taking a look at the time, 30 minutes had passed since they entered the government city hall. Could they still be busy? Yes, that was entirely possible. After all, this was the first time getting in. This huge building has plenty of rooms to lose oneself in. They might still have problems getting things done even with the aid of the NPCs present, especially if they were looking for a specific item. Gu Fei could feel his hair stand on end the moment he thought of this. He suddenly recalled that he had just taken up one such errand moments ago, and it would even require him to do something as shameful as to steal said the item. Surely, that would be even more troublesome, right? Losing himself in his thoughts in this manner, a full hour had passed just like that. That was when Chu took the initiative to break the silence. Looks like it's been an hour. Yeah. Gu Fei nodded. He was now seated on the ground. Why isn't there any news from any of the other guys? Chu asked. Are you friends with any of them? Gu Fei asked. Chu shook his head. Then, how would you know there are no further developments? Gu Fei inquired. Chu had no idea, but he equated being unaware to having no news. At the moment, he was feeling a little guilty. The more people trapped in the city hall, the more he gained courage from it. He really had no idea how Gufei could be so calm. Could he really be able to slay his way out like what he did coming in? The problem was that the two's situation was entirely different. They might have managed to sneak their way in before, but they would have to clash with the players from flower gazing in the fog head-on for the escape. At most, I'll just die, what's the big deal? This was the only way Chu could think of to console himself, and it was the worst sort of solace he could find in this game. It's done. Gufei called out energetically. After stewing here for quite some time, he finally picked himself up from the ground. I'll go find those rascals. It's best if you stay put and not move, Gufei said. Chu nodded. Gufei took 2 steps out and suddenly turned around. If you trust me, add me as a friend. It makes it easier to communicate. Of course. The name Scissorhands, Chu said. Okay. I'm called Thousand Miles Drunk. Gufei added Scissorhands as a friend once he was done introducing himself and then waved his hand while stepping out from behind the door. 1,000 Miles Drunk? 1,000 Miles Drunk. That name sounds so familiar. Scissorhands racked his brains as he squatted behind the door and then suddenly turned pale. Fuck me. I actually spent an hour squatting together with a park maniac, which is far more frightening than Cool Apple, yet I'm still alive. Scissorhands touched his limbs to check if they were still intact. He then took a peep out from the crack and saw that Gufei was already gone. Now that Gufei had 19 park points, he felt as if he were walking on a knife's edge, experiencing an inexplicable thrill as he crossed that hallway. Aside from locating the item he needed to find, which he was yet to be informed of what it was, there were still the evil 3, 4 who was looking for someone, 5 who was searching for something, and 6 who was retrieving an item. Damn, why must all their quests be so vague? Gufei swore to himself. Thinking this through for a moment, he donned on his bandana to cover his face again and made sure that his poncho with the sewn number 9 on it was prominently shown. With a wave of his arm, he pushed that large door before him. A spacious hall, with a spiral staircase on its left and right, greeted his eyes. Right in front of him was the main entrance of the government city hall. Gufei reckoned that the others had probably finished their quests by now, so if they intended to leave the city hall, they would most likely be spirited away in white light by the hands of those members from flower gazing in the fog. Alternatively, the moment they realized something was off when they stepped out the door, they would likely be pacing about right here in this main hall, right? In the end, looking all around this large hall, pushing every door he could find, he simply did not see even one of them. These rascals, are they all dead? Gufei suddenly realized that there was a high possibility that they had yet to accomplish their quests. As he was heading up the stairs to look, he suddenly heard a flurry of footsteps. Gufei, who was already several steps up on that spiral staircase, quickly flipped off it as he quickly darted to take cover behind a huge pillar. The footsteps thundered as this person stomped his way down the stairs. When this sound came to a sudden stop, Gufei was about to stretch his neck out and take a look when he felt a thick and heavy gust of wind churn. A deafening sound soon followed as this person landed somewhere near Gufei. Gufei felt the ground tremble, and he could tell from the heavy-handedness of the man's actions, that this person must be a warrior. Gufei poked his head out from behind to take a peek, and sure enough, there stood an armored warrior. He was holding a claymore in each hand as he nervously roamed his eyes up the stairs and to his left and right. He seemed to be searching for a place to hide. Not wearing a bandana or poncho. Not even reveal any identifying feature at all. Bro, do you take me for two, who is able to tell people apart just by their physique? Gufei found this to be extremely tragic. Dressed in a nondescript attire, he simply could not tell if the man was one of the 9. He could only blame himself for being too honest. Everybody wanted to hide their identities, so he did not even seek to appraise any of them when he had the chance. This man's a warrior. MHM. He's not 6, Gufei concluded. 6 was the same person who had first led him to the ruins and, with the quick movement speed he had displayed, he eliminated 6 from being a warrior. Just who could be chasing this man, though? Gufei could not help but pitch his head up toward the stairs to look as well. Chapter 469, inviting the big bad wolf in. The sound of the second set of footsteps descending the staircase was much lighter. Anybody could tell that it did not belong to a heavy job class. Was it a player or NPC that this warrior was fleeing from in his bedraggled state? Gufei pitched his head and was still unable to see anyone upstairs. All he saw was a warrior searching left and right, before he found a pillar to hide behind as well. His two hands gripped onto that claymore tightly, his body tense like a taut bowstring. The man pricked his ears and was clearly intending to wait for his target to appear so that he could deal a heavy sneak attack. In the end, the warrior did not manage to catch the enemy but was instead the recipient of the enemy's attack. Instead, Gufei raised his head to look for the warrior's opponent but only saw a fiery glow appear in midair in that hall. Descending wheel of flames. Fuck me, how unrestrained. Gufei quickly determined that there was no escape for this warrior, considering the area that this descending wheel of flames covered. In fact, he himself would incidentally be within this spell's AO. He quickly shunted to the side and dove behind another pillar as that flame wheel came crashing down. With no chance of escape, that warrior got caught in the flames. Shaking his head in resignation, the warrior happened to see Gufei. Gufei was dressed far more prominently than the man, since his face was covered and his number 9 on his poncho was stitched in a fairly conspicuous spot. This warrior was elated the moment he registered his features. 9. He's one of us after all, Gufei thought to himself. Before he could even acknowledge this, that man eagerly dashed toward Gufei. It was as if he had come across a piece of life-saving driftwood just as he was about to drown. In the end, before he could even touch this piece of driftwood, just in those few steps he had taken from hiding behind the pillar, the warrior stepped onto the burning ground from a blazing tree of 1,000 inferno. Gufei had retreated from this spell and was already incapable of helping this warrior whom he still had no idea what the numbering of was. All he could do was watch as the man disappeared into the sea of flames before him. The average mage would surely be unable to finish off a warrior with just 2 spells. Gufei was one such individual. But who else could? Drifting? Slayers? Or perhaps there was a NPC mage guarding the government city hall? Gufei decided against acting rashly without uncovering this fact. It was still fine if it really turned out to be a veteran expert player like Drifting or Slayers. Gufei was not afraid of them. What he was truly afraid of was if it was some strange high-level NPC that the system had sent. If that was the case, it was better for him not to provoke it. Gufei continued to hide behind the pillar, not moving an inch even while the footsteps from the stairs stopped. Silence returned to the main hall. Gone? Or is he or she still searching for me? Gufei had no idea if the enemy had discovered his presence. After all, the warrior had eagerly called out 9 and moved toward Gufei before he died, and he was uncertain if the person on the stairs heard or even seen him. Leaning in close to that pillar, Gufei slowly shifted and changed his scope of vision bit by bit. He still saw nothing, however. As such, Gufei picked out an apple from his dimensional pocket and heaved it up toward the stairs. Glop! The apple landed on the stairs and began to tumble down each step, ringing clear across the hall with every drop. Is that person really gone? Gufei stepped out from behind the pillar, walked to the bottom of the stairs, and caught the apple that was rolling down. He looked up, and sure enough, there was no one up the stairs. After climbing the first few steps up the stairs, he heard more footfalls from down the main hall. Gufei turned and threw the apple in his hand in the direction of the footsteps. Ah! While the apple Gufei had thrown dealt no damage, his accuracy was not dependent on any in-game skill. Therefore, it was only natural for the person to cry out in shock the moment the apple struck him square on the head. Upon realizing that what had struck him was just an apple, this person casually picked it up and examined it. That was the very moment when this newcomer saw a black-clothed man, wearing a face cover, flip off the stairs and agilely dart toward him. 9. The man hurriedly called out. Gufei came to a screeching halt but continued to maintain his distance from this man. After all, he considered 3 as an enemy, so he did not dare to drop his guard. It's me. 4. The newcomer could tell that Gufei was suspicious of him, so he quickly donned on his numbered poncho and face cover. Ah, so it's you. Gufei chuckled. He could recognize 4 as this one had spoken the most out of them a lot. Even though he had no idea how he looked, Gufei could easily make out his identity through his voice after their exchange. Where are the others? Gufei asked. We split up to do our respective quests the moment we stepped in, So I don't have the faintest idea as well. 4 answered. 4 was standing right before him, and there was no way 6 could be a warrior. This meant that person who had just died could either be 3 or 5. However, 3 was the schemer that had hidden from the others his intention to enter the government city hall. There was no reason he would react as if he had seen a savior in Gufei like that warrior had done previously. Taking all these into account, this meant that the man whom he had witnessed die could only be 5. 5's a warrior, correct? Gufei asked for to confirm his findings. He reckoned that there were probably not too many honest folks like him, who would refrain from appraising the job classes of their fellow trespassers. Yeah, that's right. 4 was indeed dishonorable, something which Gufei did not forget to disdain him for upon receiving the information. 5's been killed, Gufei informed. How's that possible? 4 was shocked. Did the people from flower gazing in the fog follow us into the building? I don't know about that. Gufei replied, but that should not be the case. He had been hiding behind the back door for over an hour. Aside from 3, no one else made it into the government city hall, so if there was someone from flower gazing in the fog who had chased them inside, surely that said person would not circle all the way to the main entrance by the courtyard to do so, right? So who could it be? 4 asked. I don't know yet. Have you completed your quest? Gufei changed the topic. It's done, but it seems that I can't get out right now. Yeah. Did you see the people outside? Or more appropriately, there's nothing aside from people outside. 4 flashed him a wry smile. Gufei appreciated someone who could still hold a sense of humor in such a situation. 1, 7, and 2 were people who were easily flustered during crunch time. Gufei was pretty much used to seeing this sort of reaction from the gang, but 4 seemed to be a little different at least. Did you come up with any solutions? Gufei asked. 4 had quite a few ideas and seemed to have assumed the mantle of a leader among them 9. He originally found this to be quite perplexing, but it became apparent after he understood the relations between these people. Logically speaking, the person who first formed this sort of gang would be the leader, yet it turned out that the person among the 9 was 3, who had other intentions in his mind. In order to better fish in troubled waters and divert the attention from himself, he could not pick up the role of a leader. Meanwhile, the person who became 1, after his rightful number 3 was taken, was already skeptical about this plan, so how would he make any sort of decision? As for 2, he seemed to be a manga fantasist. As such, 4 automatically stepped up to the plate and became the leader as a result. I wonder if there's any sort of secret passageway in this city hall directly leading to the outside? 4 wondered aloud. Gufei instantly took back his opinion of 4. It seemed that this person was also another fantasist. 4 caught Gufei's gaze and said sheepishly, actually, I've been searching for a while, but I still haven't found anything like that even now. I doubt something like this actually exists. Gufei sighed. He got it. 4 was not a fantasist. He was merely someone desperately grasping at straws. I have no idea where 6 is either. Let's find him first before we think of a solution, Gufei suggested. Would that guy who killed 5 gun for us as well? 4 anxiously looked around. It's very likely. Gufei was never the sort to mince his words, so he was absolutely clueless at how to console others. Oh, well, that's most likely the fastest way to leave this place, anyway, 4 said wryly. Hee. Gufei admired his mindset. Why don't I bring you to a safe place first? I'll go looking for 6 myself, and we can all leave when the time comes. Oh, what safe place? Right now, 4 was most interested in the word safe. Hence, Gufei brought him to that dark corner behind the back door and instructed him accordingly, wait here for a while. 2. How coincidental! 4 exclaimed when he darted behind the door before poking half his head out from behind. 2's also here. I know. Gufei said. The 2 of you, stay here and wait for me. Alright, come back soon. 4 waved toward Gufei. Damn! Do I have to find each of these lost children and bring them back one by one? Gufei thought to himself bitterly as he headed to the same corridor once more. Returning to the main hall, Gufei once more made his way up the spiral staircase on the left. That person who had finished off 5 disappeared from around that area, so Gufei decided that it was better to start looking there to see if he could find anything. At the same time, he could head over and take a look at his quest target, Giordano. He found nothing after searching through the whole second floor, so Gouffé went straight to the third floor and made his way directly to Giordano's chamber. The scene left Gouffé extremely disappointed, for that vigilante corps captain did not seem to care for personal space in its day-to-day life. A whole cadre of guards escorted it the entire day no matter where it went. Naturally, it made sense that something programmed would not have any sort of life to speak of. Right now, Gouffé did not have the time to sit on the couch and wait for the opportune moment to strike, as he still had to find their friend Six. As he opened the door to leave, a message suddenly came in, and Gouffé saw that it was from Scissorhands. I died. What happened? Gouffé was astonished. It was 4. 4? Gouffé could not make sense of things. Yeah, we were chatting when he asked if I wished to take a bet, Scissorhands recounted. Bet? He said our bet is on who will be able to leave the government city hall for a stake of 100 gold coins. Scissorhands continued to narrate. Gouffé was at a loss for words. Not thinking much into it, I casually agreed. That was when he gave me 100 gold coins and told me that I won. By the time I could react. Is that man insane? Gouffé was baffled. He finally understood what it meant by the saying, "There's nothing too strange in the boundless world beyond." Scissorhands sighed. Sorry, it's all my fault. At this moment, all Gouffé could think about the inhumane scene of the Little Red Riding Hood inviting the big bad wolf in. It's fine. You should be the one to be careful. Perhaps, he's toying with you in there, the Little Red Riding Hood. No wait, Scissorhands said. I'll definitely help you bring out that quest item of yours. Gouffé said. The number of players inside the government city hall went down by one more count yet again. Chapter 470, Shadow from Candlelight. Just who in the world is 4? This question boggled Gouffé even as he came running out of the Vigilante Corps chamber, ready to head down the stairs to look for that man. All was quiet in the entire government city hall. Even though the 2 rows of NPC guards flanking the premise existed, none of them seemed to show any signs of life in them as they stood by their stations motionlessly. Gouffé ignored these machines and dashed down the stairs, passing the main hall and entering that short and dimly lit corridor, which led to the back door. Gouffé had concluded that 4 was still around here. Considering how he had killed 2, it was no longer a park that was driven by profits, since he had even paid out 100 gold coins to Scissorhands for it. As such, this could only be a hobby, something that he derived interest and enjoyment from. If killing 2 was enjoyable for him, killing Gouffé would naturally be equally so. That was why 4 was most certainly waiting for Gouffé to return in an effort to ambush him. Gouffé had spent over an hour huddled up there, so he was naturally familiar with the range of vision afforded from that door seam. Gouffé used Blink to instantly appear past the area where it would cover. As he continued to cautiously creep forward, just slaying this man outright would be letting him off too easily, he pondered to himself. So is there any other way to mete out a more damning punishment? He inspected this intersecting corridor and saw the door handle and the 2 wall candelabras on both sides of the wall. This sight gave Gouffé an idea. Tiptoeing toward the front of the door, Gouffé pulled out a coil of rope and looped it tightly around the door handle. He turned his gaze over to that candelabra beside him. Pulling the rope over and tightening the rope, the gap between the door and the wall would lessen even further. Even more marvelous was how either end of the corridor ceiling here protruded downward, making it impossible for anyone behind the door to get out once everything aligned perfectly. It was a rather suitable punishment if he could trap 4 in the tiny and dark space that formed. That was Gouffé's plan. Thus, the next step he had to do was secure the other end to the candelabra. There was no way he would not be seen by 4 in the process, so he had to act fast. Clutching that rope tightly, he quietly waited for the cooldown for his blink to end. This was the quickest way to move. By the time 4 could see, react, and attempt to deal with the situation he was now in, he would have already accomplished the deed. The cooldown ended. Gouffé took a deep breath and checked the exact position of the wall candelabra. Reaching his hand out, he muttered the incantation under his breath. The wall candelabra was before his eyes instantly, his blink placing him at the perfect height. He swiftly looped the rope around the candelabra and then clutched it with both hands as gravity pulled him down, tightening the rope in the process. He had done so to test how secure the candelabra was mounted onto the wall. If it broke off with that tug, then it would be impossible to trap 4 behind the door, which meant Gouffé would have to cut the man down, Instead, the test went well, and the wall candelabra was so sturdy that even he was able to hang there. Gufei deftly tied a knot and happily landed on the ground. That was when he heard the muffled sound of thuds, followed by someone shouting, "What's going on?" It was Four. Gufei could feel even more joy surge in him as he chuckled. "It's me." "Who? 9? Four asked from behind the door. "That's right. You're back? Quickly come help take a look, I think this door is jammed," Four said. Gufei laughed. "It seems that this man is far duller I thought. Did he really not see me busy about before him? Or perhaps he's hoping to trick me into getting closer as he has some tricks up his sleeves as well?" Gufei thought of this as he stood where he was, saying, "Let's make a bet. Let's bet that 2 isn't behind that door any longer. I believe he's there." "Doesn't that mean I'll have to bet he's not here?" Four asked. "Yup, and you are the winner. The reward is to keep huddled up there behind the door," Gufei said. Not a sound came from behind the door. "You probably never considered the possibility of 2 and I adding each other as friends, huh?" Gufei said. Gufei made sure to confirm this with 2, and the latter said that he not revealed this fact to Four. This was also why he believed that Four was still camping out in the same spot. Not knowing that 2 had sent out a message to Gufei upon his death, he expected Gufei to return here oblivious to what had happened. "Wait there. Perhaps, I'll come back and let you out once I'm free and still remember where I've left you. Otherwise, if it's really urgent, you can always try to forcefully log out." Gufei was already on his way out after saying his piece, feeling as if there was nothing left to be said between them. "Hey, hey!" Four called out from behind that door. Gufei did not bother to even turn back as he left. The corridor was now quiet once more. The flame of the candelabra danced and cast a flickering shadow of Gufei's robe on the other side of the wall. The door was pushed open, except this was not the side that Gufei had secured but the other half of the double doors. Instead, Four quietly stood beside that door with the rope that was tightly tied to it. He took in the sight as well as the blurry shadow upon the wall. Shadow. Gufei had forgotten about shadows. From the time he walked into the corridor, even though he never appeared in the line of sight from the door seam, Four could already tell that someone was present from the shadow that was projected onto the wall. He had no idea who the person was and even originally thought that this person would continue to walk toward him and eventually come into his line of sight. Who would have guessed that the shadow on the wall would disappear and reappear, closing in several meters toward him all of a sudden? Gufei used Blink to get past the area of vision available from that door seam, but Four was able to garner 2 pieces of information from this quick movement of his shadow. First was that the person had a special skill that gave him high movement speed. Second was that the same person was aware of his presence behind the door and was likely meaning to harm him. He arrived to this conclusion when the person took great measures to hide himself from his line of sight from start to finish. There were only 2 players that would know he was behind the door, 2 and 9. Given that he had already sent 2 back to the spawn point, 9 should not have any ill intention toward him. That was when he thought of the only possibility. 9 was aware that he had killed off 2. How would he know? Of course, it was possible if those 2 had added each other as friends, and 2 informed him accordingly. 4 made this split-second deduction just from the shadow moving several meters, and not one of his conjecture was a mistake. That was why, while Gufei was planning on how to jam the door, 4 had already made preparations from behind the door. Thus, the moment Gufei had blinked over to secure the rope onto the wall candelabra, 4 had promptly dove out from behind the door. Gufei took quite some time to tie the rope, tighten it, and do the knot. He thought he could make it in time because he totally presumed that 4 would be unaware or be unprepared for the situation he was about to be in. Several seconds would have gone by before 4 realized that something was amiss and made the necessary judgment to extricate himself from the mess. Gufei did expect 4 to have already concocted a plan, darting out the moment he blinked away and using those precious few seconds to head to the other door as quickly as he could. Gufei was already several meters away by the time they exchanged words. The sound that traveled across the corridor echoed well thanks to the distance between them. Had Gufei been a little closer, he might have been able to discern the difference, but he had unfortunately not gone close, while 4 had not intentionally raised his suspicion toward this possibility. Thus, 4 only stepped out from behind the door after he was sure that Gufei had truly departed. Looking at what Gufei had devised for him, he marveled That was close. I almost got myself trapped inside there. That scoundrel is too much. 4 tugged at the rope and found both ends to be well secured. 4 would have really been left with no recourse had he been trapped inside. I must kill that man. 4 looked visibly excited at this prospect. That man seems to have quite a good relationship with 2, so he'll surely try to help to accomplish his quest. And I happen to know that guy's quest quite well. I already know where you will be going. 9. 4 thought as he left the corridor. Gufei climbed up the spiral staircase. He was not finished with 4, but the critical task at hand right now was to take care of 3, locate 6, and find the item 2 needed. Just what am I trying to accomplish this time around? Am I an NPC providing a service to players? Gufei was in tears as he ruminated over the fact. The first and foremost task he needed to deal with was 2's quest. He had originally thought that this quest required him to steal an item, so he did not attempt to get any clue off the NPC guards. However, bearing the thought of testing things out, his casual query of the item's location to the guards yielded the desired result. There was a clue about the item on the top floor. Gufei had really not expected this. As he reported this good news to 2, the man thought this through. If I were in your shoes, the guards would be certainly hounding for my life, let alone allow me to ask them a question. I believe it is precisely because you are the one asking it that it is considered as just a regular item. Why wouldn't the NPC answer you accordingly if you're just inquiring after general information? Gufei thought that his words made sense and could not help but be impressed over how Parallel World was reinventing the way people should think about MMOs. The quest user was unable to get any sort of clue, yet an outsider would be able to get more information. This was simply too counterintuitive as far as logic in MMOs go, so veteran gamers like Brother Assist and a lot would surely have never considered such a possibility. Soon, Gufei reached the attic. This attic was cramped, with a low ceiling, and everything looked to be in disuse. Cobwebs were everywhere as Gufei coughed from the motes of dust suspended in the air. What made Gufei even more morose was the fact that there was not even a single NPC present on this floor, so would that not mean he would have to search through the place all by himself without any aid whatsoever? Furthermore, the item that 2 needed to find was some sort of secret pattern recipe. 2's quest did not specify if it was a piece of paper or a book or any other form, so Gufei could only grimace and bear as he sifted through the trash pile. He was soon covered in dust from his search. Half-used candle, rusted nail, starved wreath, burned stick. The attic was filled with items of all sorts of names. Gufei suspected that the system had specifically designed this to be a nest where all the quest items were hidden in and would then direct the players to come search through. After saving a trapped butterfly from a broken spider's web, Gufei followed a weak ray of sunlight through the hole in the roof and found a piece of paper in the half-drawn drawer from a broken wooden table.